do. 91.1 FM, The Boss.
Programs presented are submitted by members of our community and are a proud sponsor of KNLY 91.1 FM. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect those of KNLY 91.1 FM, The Boss, and affiliates.
Hey guys, welcome everybody to Superhuman with Dr. V and Jason Phelps. I am Dr. V, and with me as always is Jason Phelps. Man, we're going to have a cool show today, man.
Yeah, looking forward to this one.
The whole show is on protein.
Yeah.
Jason's favorite subject.
It's actually,
mine
this
too.
show is based on it, but my entire life is based on it pretty much.
So I'm really happy to introduce a good friend of mine, Rob Deboer. Known him for about 5 years now. We met through Prove at the Ketone Company. He's a former multi-sport collegiate athlete from South Carolina Gamecocks. So, you know, I posted a couple of pictures of him. If you've seen some of his old videos, he's like more like a Christian Okoye, you know, type Jerome Bettis type runner, bruiser.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask him about it. So, absolutely.
He's well known as Coach Rob Deboer and runs Body Comp Keto, and he has a ton of followers on Instagram and Facebook. And you know, I wanted to bring him to the table because he kind of brings a no nonsense, simplified version of understanding of eating that's kind of actionable and sustainable. So, you there with us, Rob?
I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Hey, bud. So we'll have you up on our screen here so we can, you know, share. But just intro to you. How you been, man? How you been through all this COVID stuff?
You know, we're making it probably just like you guys, kind of getting bored of lifting things that we don't normally lift, and flipping things we don't normally flip. But we're doing just fine. I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely, man. And I've watched your transformation. Dude, he's lost like 20 pounds of fat since January. You see him?
50-day transformation, that was impressive. It was good work.
Yeah, it looks good, man. It looks good. But basically today I wanted you on because of your take on eating and on protein and things like that. And to me, like, I want the listeners to understand muscle mass. Muscle is the largest organ in the body. Skeletal muscle is. But there's no talk of muscle. There's no talk. Everything's about fat.
Right.
Everything's about carbs. But it's like protein is like the black sheep of the family. Sure. I would argue we don't have an over-fat problem. We have an under-muscle problem nationally. And there's a really big silent epidemic medically, physically of sarcopenia. And that's basically loss of muscle mass. So, Rob, why you know, what's your take on muscle and why we need it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, you know, guys, I have 3 letters behind my name. You guys have PhD. I have DAD. I'm just a dad, right? So I'm the regular, everyday, average guy that I would argue tries to simplify things, because there's a saying that goes, a confused mind oftentimes says no. And nowadays, there's no shortage of Instagram experts, know-it-all personal trainers. Look, I was a fat, chubby, fluffy fat loss coach. Didn't mean I didn't know what I was talking about. I just didn't live it. And so January 1st, 2020, I just said, you know what, this is kind of silly. I need to go show people what I do, preach, teach, and educate, and actually live it. Hence the whole idea. And, you know, you guys are both saying everything that I believe, teach, and preach. And I want you to think of it this way. We always talk about losing fat. What if we change the narrative to winning muscle, right? I think we would all argue, hey, if you focus on losing fat, there's a good chance you're going to lose skeletal muscle mass. However, there's a better chance if you focus on winning muscle, you will automatically become a better, more efficient, effective fat burner. So that's kind of been our narrative, prioritizing protein. We don't believe carbs is the reason anyone's fat. We don't believe eating high fat automatically makes people skinny. We believe protein should always be the priority. And whether you like it or not, calories count. They matter. Now, context is key, and that's where we get all these dogmatic views, and I think we just try to stay in our lane, present the facts, remove opinion. Our feelings don't get hurt that way. And I think when you realize it all said and done, muscle matters. It makes a difference. Go to a nursing home. You know one thing you don't see? You don't see much skeletal muscle mass. You don't see anybody shaking your hand with a firm grip. You know, that's something I also believe in. Grip strength, believe it or not, as silly as it sounds,
longevity
is directly related to life longevity.
That's right. So basically, muscle, it medically, it leads to, it's our greatest area for glucose disposal, better oxidation of lipids, so better use of cholesterol. Less muscle leads to cachexia. That's a medical term. It just basically means wasting away of the body, which what you see, you know, what Rob just described. So it leads to falls, breaks, injuries. It's the leading cause of people going to the nursing home. It's immobility, loss of muscle mass.
Absolutely.
Not disease. And so again, we need to move it, like we talk about each week, from the aesthetic. Right, because everybody thinks, oh, I don't want to get big, and it's.
I don't think that at all. I would love to get big.
Yeah, and move it to the health benefits of it. The more muscle you have, the less overall, the lower your overall mortality.
Absolutely.
Actually, I mean, you're stronger. You're more able to fend off diseases.
Stronger people are harder to kill, right?
Yeah. So what would you add on to that as far as, I mean, what y'all do at TWC?
So when I'd rather kind of address Rob a little bit more while we're talking about it. So when Willie first told me he was coming on, obviously I jumped on to kind of do a little research and look at some of the stuff that Rob puts out, and I couldn't have been probably more wrong about my first assumption about what it was going to be, and I couldn't have been any happier. I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. It's probably the closest thing I've seen from somebody on the keto side to actually telling the full story and not just a very kind of bastardized version of it, right? So I was very excited to kind of hear more about what Rob had to say about maybe some of the misconceptions that people have when it comes to protein and comes to high amounts of fat in your diet.
So what do you recommend from the beginning? You know, just from a 30,000 foot view, you know, Rob, like what do you start with people as when, you know, as far as recommending protein and things like that, eating wise?
Yeah, so we kind of have this silly philosophy, and again, I'm the simple guy, right? I don't have all the high science and the degrees, but we do believe in application. We believe in anecdotal evidence. You know, there's no shortage of that. And we believe in science, right? So at the end of the day, as simple as this sounds, the only diet that works for you, Coach, and, you know, for any listener would be the one they'll do. Now, we've got to create context there, right? I would do a sugar-coated cereal diet if that actually would work. But the reality is there are some essentials, and that's why we say, look, carbs aren't the reason people are fat. They might not be for everyone, but we don't want to believe that dogmatic position. High fat isn't bad, but it's probably not the fastest way to see fat loss. And again, nobody, I would think this is an interesting question. How often do we have people say, hey, how many carbs can I have? What should my fat macros be? Yet very seldom do we have someone talk about prioritizing protein. And so our goal is to show, number one, if we are talking about calories and we are creating context around the whole conversation, not to minimize hormonal balance and stress and sleep and all the variables that go into altering body composition, I think we could agree. Protein's a very thermic nutrient. Protein's a very satiating nutrient. Some would argue the most satiating nutrient. And again, what do we all have in common? I would argue a 2-year-old, an 82-year-old, an athlete, a sedentary person, we all want to age well. Well, we know aging well has everything to do with keeping and creating. You know, a lot of people say we need to preserve and protect. Hey, you want creating muscle to be an ongoing process. Your body will do a fine job. You talked about sarcopenia. Your body will do a fine job of catabolizing its own skeletal muscle mass as we age, as we go. So I think context matters. I think what someone will do matters. Nobody would disagree, myself included. Perfection isn't always possible. So what would be perfect is single ingredient, whole food, various amino acid profiles. I'm not anti-plant protein, but I am very pro-animal protein, and I'm probably even more pro all of the above. However, that doesn't necessarily work for everyone. So I'm not one that's against protein supplements because it makes things practical.
Right.
But again, there's a difference between perfection and practical. And so I would argue if we could all just start with real food, when food doesn't have ingredients, it is the ingredient. And if we could start focusing on single ingredient whole foods, mixing up our amino acid profiles, that's just a fancy way of saying the different types of protein, whether it's red meat, chicken, fish, poultry, eggs, plant-based proteins, whatever. And I just tell people, look, let's see if we can get you to 100 grams a day, no matter whom you are.
Right.
100 grams a day of real food protein. That's a stretch for so many people. I don't think it would be too much for anyone. I think it's oftentimes never reached by most people, especially women. And so that's kind of where we start just to find, one question that's interesting, and then I'll turn it back over to you guys. Yeah. Everybody knows where they want to go. I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to lose 30 pounds. I want to gain 10 pounds. But when you ask them, what's your current location? Well, how much protein are you currently, what are your current fat macros? How many calories are you currently consuming? Very few people ever track what they're currently doing. They all know what they want, but they don't know where they are. And so we just try to start there, and we always begin with prioritizing protein.
Yep. Perfect.
That's excellent answer. I love that. I know that whenever we start to work with new people, that's one of the questions we always ask is, what are you doing currently? Give us the most accurate representation of what you're doing currently. And not only is it difficult, it's almost impossible for most people to tell you what they're eating on a daily basis.
The average American eats between 60 and 90 grams of protein a day, and that's a figure. Women are closer to the 40, sort of 50, 60 grams, and guys are closer to the 90. But that 100 grams, like I said, that Rob just mentioned, that's a good start. Medically, I recommend, as we talked about, at least, if they want to build and maintain muscle, a gram per pound of body weight, which it seems like a lot.
It does seem like a lot.
But I see their cognitive function improves. They feel better. Their hormones and enzyme, everything improves. I mean, they just say they feel better. But that 100 grams is just for, a lot of people is just a stretch, but, it's a basis.
So as somebody that's been in the bodybuilding world for a while, I've seen the far extremes of the high side of that. Rob, and what you've seen with your athletes and with yourself, how far are you willing to push that number north before you start?
Say for athletes.
Yeah.
I what's great is we have not scripted this. We haven't even talked in months, and yet we're all saying the same thing. Here's what I love what you just said, and not many people caught this. You said 1 gram per pound of body weight. You know what most of the experts say? They'll say 1 gram per pound of lean skeletal muscle mass. Will you show me anyone that knows how much lean skeletal muscle mass they're walking around with? That's just a non-figurable number, right? Most people don't have the means to scan their body.
Do a DEXA or anything.
DEXA scan. So I just love, because, again, a confused mind says, no, well, gosh, nobody has any earthly idea. At least the vast majority of people don't. So that's a great point. I would argue this. The upper limit really isn't established. I don't think it's possible to overconsume protein. There's this stigma about, it's bad for your kidneys.
Yeah, I'm about to talk about that.
Proven time and time again to be wrong.
Yep.
And I'm still waiting for there to be real research. Now, of course, everything is in context. If you've got a pre-existing issue with, let's say, gout or something where high amounts of protein. Well, there's deeper reasons.
There's other reasons for the gout.
You bet.
And there's
100%.
Yeah.
And so
like that protein.
High protein is never the problem.
No. So the studies, there's two main studies that everybody goes back on, and it's a Dutch and Finnish study, and basically showing nephrologists will still say that high protein is bad. But show me the study. The study has never been done on healthy individuals. The studies that were done showed that it was worse was actually on people with CKD or chronic kidney disease already, or dialysis. So they were already metabolically compromised. Most recently, they've already had a big study at McMaster University that debunked it, basically. And basically talked on healthy adults. They did it you know, it was a meta-analysis, which we've talked about in the past, and it was published in the Journal of Nutrition. And it challenged the perceived dangers of protein-rich diet, a notion introduced like in the 80s. It suggested that, you know, large amounts of protein lead to progressive kidney disease. This concept's been around for about 50 years, okay? And you hear it all the time. Higher proteins cause kidney disease. The fact is, however, there's just no evidence to support the hypothesis. In fact, the evidence shows that the contrary is true. Actually, higher protein increases, not decreases, kidney function.
That's
in a
amazing.
Healthy individual.
Absolutely. And you have to qualify that. You know, you have to make sure you do, because people will extrapolate that to everyone immediately. There's no gray area, evidently, whenever we make statements anymore. It's, well, you said it's this, so it's, you know, it's either all this or all that, right? But
muscle
are
is
so different.
Yeah, muscle's much more than locomotion and movement and aesthetics. What I want to leave people with is that muscle is really metabolic currency. The more muscle you have, the better you burn blood sugar. The better you burn the food that you eat, period. So again, you know, going back, why do we have this problem? Okay, I think we're focusing on fat and obesity because we can see it, right? And it's overt, and not the solution, which is muscle. And and Rob, you know, talked about that earlier. As we age, we naturally get anabolic resistance, period. Why? Because our hormones go down, things like that. So it's much harder to build and maintain muscle, but also our muscles, the muscle that we do have, it has a difficult time processing or utilizing protein. So again, over 65, we even need more protein.
That's right. So when you look at like the food pyramid, Rob, and things like that, do you get as infuriated as I do when you see it and see the breakup of how they lay out your daily plate, what that should look like, and how do you go about talking to people and saying, well, you know, that's not exactly what you should be doing. This is what I prefer. So how do you look at that and talk to people about that?
Yeah, I think the reason we kind of throw in our anchor, which is context is key. For example, you know, to give you so there's a lot of these fad terms. Intermittent fasting, it's excellent. OMAD, 1 meal a day, I get it. But again, context is key. It's got to be something someone will do. And here's what's interesting. I would believe that, you know, when we talk about muscle, what is that? Muscle protein synthesis, right? We want to keep and create skeletal muscle mass. And there's variables, IGF-1 and mTOR, and initiating these things, and too much could be counterproductive. But look, if we're all implementing things that create the perfect strategy, look, there's two essentials. There's a stimulus and a supply. Stimulus, that's code for strength training, be it get in where you fit in. Body weight exercise, strength training exercise, heavier the better when it comes to context, obviously not compromising safety or injury. And then the supply, which is your protein. It's the building blocks. It's the amino acids and the varying profiles. So our stance has always been, look, what if we prioritize protein as often as possible? You know, there's a lot of research that will validate these kind of anabolic response windows. I'm in that camp. I can't quantify it other than my own personal experience, and I believe there's research that validates that. For example, Rob, do you believe in the OMAD? Well, I don't think OMAD optimizes your ability to initiate protein synthesis because there are these feeding windows when I'm not talking about 5 or 6 meals a day. I'm talking about 3 to 5 responses to protein. So what I'll have a lot of clients do is, hey, you know what, have protein maybe mixed with your ketones. It might extend the life because, number one, you're adding a thermic nutrient, you're adding a satiating nutrient, you're adding an extra 100 calories via a scoop of protein. Just simple little hacks. Again, I believe more doesn't necessarily mean better. We all could agree quality will always trump quantity. But again, there's kind of this balance between both. When it comes to carbs, there's nobody fat, out of shape, or overweight from eating oats or sweet potatoes or even rice. The problem is the context of that conversation. That's not the problem. You know, as the keto saying says, don't blame the bread for what the butter did. Well, don't blame the oatmeal for what the tall glass of orange juice and the brown sugar that you put on top did, right? And I'm not here to promote carbs. I'm just saying context matters. Most people if they prioritize protein, if they eat clean single ingredient carbs, preferably vegetables, and then they control fats. We don't need to overconsume fat. Obviously, fats are essential. That's kind of where we start with people, and people realize, wow, 100 grams of protein, that's, although it's only 400 calories, that's a lot of food. 200 grams of protein, that's a lot of food. So we never really come to this, gosh, I feel like I'm dieting, I'm living on tree bark water and rice cakes, because people are able to eat plenty of food, and that's where I think protein becomes that priority, or at least goal on a daily basis.
And it really becomes easy when you do, even if you do 3 meals, you do 30 grams of protein in every meal or more. And then maybe a supplement in between. But protein itself, just like we keep talking about, it's literally the black sheep of the macronutrient family. Like we're all talking about fats and all talking about carbs. Nobody stresses protein, but it's literally, like you mentioned, Rob, it's the essential building block like of every single tissue, organ, hair, skin, nails, enzymes, I mean everything, hormones, everything. So we do need to start prioritizing. Are we up to a first commercial break, Carlos? Okay, so we're going to take a commercial break real quick, Rob, for our sponsors, and we'll be back in about 2 minutes.
Sounds great.
Cupcakes and Bubbles, located at 26400 Kirkendall Road in Tomball, Texas. Cupcakes and Bubbles has the sweetest and most delicious cupcakes for the entire family. From chocolate raspberry, strawberry rhubars, cookies and cream, and the most popular among kids, the s'mores cupcake. Come and enjoy our cupcakes with a glass of your favorite bubbles. Visit www.cupcakesandbubbles.com for the complete list of our delicious cupcakes. Order online through our webpage. DoorDash and Uber Eats is available too. Enjoy life's sweetest moments with Cupcakes and Bubbles.
This was a proud sponsor of KNLY.
Turn on your glam today. The Jenna Klein collection is here, elaborated with natural products. Give yourself a compliment with our organic lip glosses in more than 15 shades. With the Jenna Klein lip gloss collection, you can hydrate your lips and keep that glamorous look that you need. Turn on your glam. Visit jennaklein.com. And don't forget our skincare collection with natural ingredients that will improve the skin's appearance and prevent visible signs of aging. We have everything you need to achieve smooth and vitalized skin. jennaklein.com. Turn on your glam today.
This was a proud sponsor of KNLY 91.1 FM.
It started as a dream. When I was a little kid, I always wanted to have my own restaurant, and it was a dream that finally we had the opportunity to build it here in the Woodlands, and I'm so happy with it.
It's a really authentic Italian food. I try to maintain the most original possible. It's very important. Every day I make my fresh pasta.
Chi mangia bene, mangia italiano. Please come and visit us.
This was a proud sponsor of KNLY 91.1 FM.
And we're back. So real quick, I want to jump into why is there all this confusion? Okay, why is there all this confusion? And you kind of touched on it earlier, Rob, is there's a lot of internet experts and things like that, and there's a lot of people that are making a lot of noise, and I call it the mouse with a microphone. Basically, it's small groups of people that are speaking very loudly, very outspoken, and you know. So on one side you have PETA, and you have all these people against animal protein and things, and then vegans, and then you know on the other side you have big cereal companies like Kellogg's. They give millions to messaging. You know, Kellogg's I think gives $1 billion. On the other side you have the dairy, egg, meat farmers, you know, regulated by the USDA. They're not allowed to make health claims or say what a lot of the other advertisers can. You know, one side's run by the FTC, you know, so Kellogg's and all these, and they can make claims like oats lower cholesterol, all these things. We have a lot of propaganda and bad science that's very agenda driven. Okay, so in obesity, you mentioned this earlier too, Rob. In obesity, you know, the higher the amount of the protein while calories are controlled, this is according to studies. The higher the amount of protein while calories are controlled, the more lean muscle mass and fat loss. Okay, we have something called obesogenic sarcopenia. In other words, the bigger you are, the wider, the bigger the waistline, the more muscle mass you have. Okay, we've said this in other shows where we have, we're overfed and malnourished here in the U.S. So even skinny people can have sarcopenia, can have a little amount of muscle mass.
Probably more likely to have it.
Yes, and so, but we're doing everything we said. Red meat consumption's gone down by 29% since '75. Chicken's gone up. Dairy and eggs gone down. But it's quality protein,
right,
not quantity. Now, I really want to touch on this because it's important to me, and I know it's important to Jason and I'm sure Rob too. But plant versus animal protein.
So my first thought when I hear that is amino acid profile, right? And Rob said it earlier, getting a good cross section of all the different types is a really good way to go about it. But if you're really, leaning into one of those completely, you're going to be missing some things, right?
Absolutely, and I mean they're two completely different proteins. I'm not trying to skew it or move anybody away from vegetarian, but the caloric burden that you would have to take on to meet that same amount of amino acid profile, because you'll hear people say, well, even on the Game Changers video, you can have the same amino acids, and yeah, you can, but like for instance, this is an easy one for the listeners, right? One small chicken breast, 4 ounces. You'd need 6 cups of quinoa to match the same amino acid profile.
That's an enormous amount of food. If you've ever tried to eat a cup of quinoa, you know that 6 cups would be quite the undertaking.
Yeah, and with plant protein, you also don't get the B12. You don't get the zinc. You don't get leucine, the main branched chain amino acid that we need to build muscle. So what's your take? I really want to hear your take on plant versus animal protein, Rob.
Yeah, for sure. So on the surface, and I don't mean this with any disrespect, I've got incredible vegetarian and vegan friends, and that's why I always go back to, hey, the only diet that's going to work for you is the one you'll do. But if we uncover and unpack science, so I would tell you this, you line up 10 people, I can point to you out of those 10 people, aesthetically, as simple as this sounds, aesthetically, I can tell you which ones are the meat eaters versus which ones are the plant eaters. I can aesthetically pick out a vegan versus a carnivore all the time, every time.
Is it because they look sick and like they're dying?
Well, I'll let you
extrapolate from that.
I'll let you, but so then let's explain why. Well, as you guys are familiar, most people don't talk about this, but there are a couple what are called protein digestibility scores. One's corrected, one's indispensable. Basically, that's code for what is the bioavailability. In other words, it doesn't matter if your body has it. What matters is, does your body use it?
Yes.
And does it use it for the right reasons? And so that's where I would argue everything that you guys are saying is absolutely correct. It's not quantity, it's the quality, and it's the sustainability.
Yes.
I don't know if this stat is true, but the average vegan isn't a vegan after 2 or 3 years. Why? Because it just becomes a very difficult lifestyle when aesthetics is important to people. So I would say this, I'm a big believer in get in where you fit in, what makes you happy is best. But when it comes to science and biology, there is no discrepancy as it relates to protein viability or bioavailability. Animal-based protein would trump plant-based protein for the purpose of muscle protein synthesis and sustainability. So if our goal is to keep, preserve, protect, and even create muscle as we age, it becomes very laborsome, burdensome, and difficult to do with plant-based proteins alone.
So in that context, so you have someone who has the inability to process animal proteins, and that does exist, and we have clients who we've worked with who are very strict vegan. What in your opinion is the best way to go about maintaining or even creating new muscle for somebody like that?
Well, first of all, we know this, protein doesn't work as well without the stimulus, correct? So that's another kind of putting everything into context. Hey, high protein's great, but you know what maximizes high protein? A powerful stimulus to create the reason for that protein. So I think that's also kind of skews the models in some of the evidence or data that were presented is, hey, exercise, strength training, the stimulus is equally as important. As far as my vegan friends and vegetarian friends, I think we've got to then go tackle all of the other accompanying variables. For example, sleep, stress, all these other things that impact muscle protein synthesis, those need to be spot on. Those need to be targeted.
And hormones coming from, you know, my specialty. You know, this is a great military study that they did, and they fasted these guys. These were high level trained athletes basically, and they fasted them. And one thing that helped them maintain their muscle mass while they were fasting and calorie restricting was resistance training. And they had a control group. They did the ones that actually maintained or build their muscle more, they actually administered testosterone to one group, and they actually on a fast built and maintained muscle.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So I mean, there's a very potent MPS, you know, muscle protein synthesis signal from testosterone. So if we look at the general population that is lacking in it now, starting in their 20s, 30s, you know, 40s now, that's another important signal. And that, like I said, that's another, you know, I just want to throw it out there.
That topic sounds very male-centric, but it's not.
It's not. No, it's ridiculous to think that it's only happening in men.
And it is.
We can see the studies from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s, the stats of men and their average testosterone levels. But to think that that's only happening in women is ridiculous. I mean, in men is ridiculous because we're exposed to the same foods, the same environmental toxins, stressors, stimulus, and everything else. So one of the most powerful stimulus, and Rob just said it, that we see is resistance training to build or maintain muscle.
So the application of that idea then is, ladies, get out there and lift weights.
Yes.
You know, booty bar is great. Yoga's fantastic. I love it. But do something that puts some stress on your skeletal system.
And into your 50s, 60s, and 70s, this is not a you know, sport or modality for like just younger people. Yes, some people have joint issues, things like that. You know, that may be helped with the training, but there's safe ways to have resistance training into your 60s, 70s, and 80s, and if you want to stay out of a nursing home, like build muscle, maintain muscle.
Guys, I want you to let me just make a, because I think it's so. If people could just think in this. Again, I'm the simple guy, right? You guys are the experts with the high science, but I want you to think about this. The body is really smart. Skeletal muscle is very resilient. However, I want you to think of the context of the ketone conversation, where the vast majority of the keto community is recognizing high fat, low carb, and controlled protein. Like we would never want to control protein. And I want you to think why that is so discouraging to people like us, because we want people to see success. I don't care how you get there. I just know there's some essentials. The problem with limiting protein is, and you guys will agree, after the age of 30, but especially 40 and 50, losing muscle is devastating to aging. Well, what's happening is all of the people that are being drawn into this conversation and eating high fat, low carb, and hey, make sure you don't eat too much protein, it turns to chocolate cake, which is completely false. But the whole context of that is you have these people that they're losing weight. That's not the goal. Our goal is to lose fat and keep muscle. And so the problem therein lies, how much harder is it for a 40, 50, 60-year-old man, especially woman, to add muscle back? So the last thing we want to do is ever create an environment or ever create a variable that could possibly minimize creating, let alone catabolizing skeletal muscle mass. And that's the problem. That's my passion. That's why prioritizing protein is the loudest message that we preach and teach, because so many people are losing skeletal muscle mass. They step on the scale doesn't tell you what you lost.
That's right.
It only tells you how much. And they see a success, and then a year later they're scared to death because that lighter body with less muscle begins burning fewer calories, and now the scale's going in the opposite direction, and they could very well be worse off than when they began.
That's right.
I like to, that's why at my clinic I like to do DEXAs, because I can show them. And and some of them come in their basket cases because they're weighing themselves and, oh my God, it's been 3 months and I'm doing this and I've only lost 1 pound. And yes, but you gained 5 pounds of muscle and lost 4 pounds of 6 pounds of fat.
Who wouldn't take that?
Yeah,
Who wouldn't
exactly.
take that?
But the thing about it is that again, it's very frustrating to me and to you. I'm sure you, Rob, I mean, you've already expressed it. There's no one right thing for longevity. Okay. There's not one right diet, one right supplement, one right. There's a lot of them that need to work in conjunction, but I think we need to get the right message out there, and protein needs to get back out there.
That's right.
As a message. And again, I've said this. It's the black sheep of the macronutrient family. Everybody's afraid of it. Don't eat too much. It's bad for you. And we're here to tell you it's not. That's right. It's not true.
It's time to be the vocal minority again.
Yeah, exactly.
We let a lot of the interest groups really get too loud and obscure the message. And I think that's where, I think Rob's done a wonderful wonderful job looking back through everything he's put out. It's a very consistent, strong message. Protein is not the enemy. Protein is actually the farthest thing from the enemy that we have.
Now, I really want to get into this, Rob, because you're an expert in it, and we've had great long conversations on it. How do you use, as a fellow exogenous ketone user, how do you introduce that, or how do you use that in conjunction with the recommendation, the dietary recommendations, and why do you recommend actually an exogenous ketone versus just the ketone diet or the ketogenic diet? We do this at our clinic. And again, I stress it's a tool. Right. It's a very important tool. As with any supplement, okay, I had an email the other day. A guy said, I'm doing these supplements, this. And he goes, my diet's been really, really bad. He says, but these are my supplements. I'm like, that's a negative net zero.
That's right.
These supplements are supplements.
Take care of the big rocks first.
Take care of the big rock, yeah. And so going back, what is your take on exogenous ketones and why we need them? What do they do? How do they help with building and maintaining muscle mass?
Sure. So, number one, you're exactly right. It's a tool. A treadmill is a tool. Broccoli is a tool. Intermittent fasting is a tool. Prioritizing protein is a tool. The reason ketones are so special is because it's a caloric energy molecule that you can't get from food. You must make them, or now we have the ability to supplement them. However, with that, as you can imagine, not all labels tell the whole truth. Not all products tell the whole story, and that's why we promote the Keto Nat version, because it's naturally fermented, it's got multiple patents, and it's the formulation of fermented ketones, fermented leucine, and CMed 100, which in my opinion, the greatest takeaway for me is this. Number one, it's a compliance tool. It will control mood, mindset, appetite, cravings, give you energy and endurance, but most importantly, preserve and protect skeletal muscle mass. But I take it a step further, and this is what I've really come to see in my own personal results. And that is, I've kind of coined this term, you could call it whatever you want. I've got researchers, Dr. Lowry and Jacob Wilson looking into this. Willie, I think you could too. But I call it exponential nutrition. Like, is it possible to eat fewer calories, yet gain more nutrition, both macronutrient and micronutrient support from the same plate of food? For example, I believe ketones in the body, because they're a signaling molecule, allows my body to extract more protein from that plate of protein, carbon, fat than someone that's not taking them. Now, that's a hypothesis. It's based on anecdotal evidence. I think there's surely merit there, because I've watched myself under-consume calories versus what MyFitnessPal or the carb counter or this formula or that formula. And I think therein lies something pretty interesting, and they would call it a synergistic effect, where 1 + 1 + 1 = more than 3. I believe ketones give my body the ability to do more with less material. And if building material or supply, protein, is one of the essential variables of creating muscle or initiating protein synthesis, then wouldn't we be wise to do anything we can to maximize the use of what we have? So that's where I think ketones come in from a compliance standpoint. Someone's body will operate better, and I would argue this is why we also do a extended fast on a monthly basis for digestive rest and metabolic reset. It's because I believe it creates exponential nutrition, meaning I will gain more from the same plate of food than my identical twin who isn't using ketones and isn't getting that signaling benefit from the ingredients formulated in that product.
Yeah, we don't want to, I mean, I don't want to get too into the weeds, but there is a lot of studies, and you know, the ketones themselves, you know, from inhibiting what we call HDAC. It's an HDAC inhibitor. It increases mTOR. There's a lot of things that it does, and one thing I've noticed from myself, my patients, my athletes, is that even in a caloric deficit, on a day, let's just say they have an off day and they don't get the right amount of macros or whatever, they're able to still build or maintain muscle and not lose muscle, not catabolize muscle, because they have that energy component of the exogenous ketones. Now, more and more data is coming out on it.
Is there a timing factor involved in that? That's one thing I haven't heard.
Well, I will tell you personally that I have not failed to take it twice a day for the last 5 years.
In relation to
in the morning
food
and then
consumption and training, is that?
I recommend to most of them, if they're going to take it, I recommend as I don't really like pre-workouts as far as this, you know, high stimulant. I will recommend that as a pre-workout for energy.
And mental focus?
Mental focus, very, very good mental focus. Okay. You know, it goes directly past the blood-brain barrier right to the brain. You light up, your brain lights up. But as far as the body composition, from a personal level, I can tell you this, you know, 4 years ago now, my dad passed away just unexpectedly. The first time in years that I had stepped away from a barbell. You know, we were handling family issues, and I stepped away, and I literally hadn't picked up a bar, done anything. I'd taken my ketones every day because it's part of my diet. It's part of my daily routine. It's part of my daily routine. And I came back 5 weeks later, 6 weeks later, hadn't touched a bar, and PR'd my front squat more than heaviest I'd ever lifted. I think I posted it on, you know, Facebook or something years ago. But it was one of those where you know, if you step away from the barbell in a couple of weeks.
Weights go down after a month, for sure.
And but to come back and have the same amount of muscle and not lose any, and then actually PR a heavy lift after being away for 5 weeks, that was just, after that I was, you know, I was already, you know, a believer and sold, but there's a lot of signaling that goes on. There's a lot of cell signaling. There's a lot of gene signaling on and off. Now we know a lot about epigenetics and about the ability, the body's ability to, with nutrition and lifestyle, to actually click on and off certain genes and gene expression. There's a lot of data on the ketones actually being able to do that, but also preserving protein, preserving muscle tissue. So I just use it now. It's you know, if they asked me today, you had to give up every single supplement and only take one, I would take exogenous.
So Rob, let me go back to you real quick. You said specifically you use a specific one because of a couple of variables, including that they're fermented and whatnot. Can you talk a little bit more about why, or maybe somebody who doesn't use ketones and doesn't know much about them, where they should start, like what they should look for?
So I think it's a very interesting case because this is one of the perhaps only quantifiable dietary supplements. In other words, I have my favorite protein. I have an animal-based protein and I have a whey isolate protein. I don't believe much in bars. So basically I have a protein supplement. However, I can't quantify that mine works better at the cellular level than maybe what your option would be. We can cite science, but there is no actual short-term validation versus I can go get 33 other brands of ketones. And within 1 hour, one serving 100% of the time, I can quantify the effectiveness of that supplement versus the keto nat version that we choose based on what your blood work is telling me. Right. And then we go take that quantifiable evidence. Hey, this shows up faster, is sustained longer at higher levels than any competing product other than the ester, which, by the way, the ester is about $30+ a serving, and it tastes like a shot of kerosene. Yep. Nevertheless, so there's an ester that is very effective, and there's a keto salt that's very effective, and it's the keto nat version. So if we take that and then we quantify that in the blood, in the body, and then we go measure it against anecdotal evidence, personal customers, clients. Willie, you've seen it. We're just scratching the surface of where this will go. I know Jeff Volek put out a study. I don't know if you've seen it. It's been out a while, but it's kind of been underground. I'll make sure you get a copy of that, Willie. And as it relates to performance, there's just a lot of theories that I think will be proven true. Right now, it's a hypothesis in many instances, but I would argue this. If I'm going to spend money and you ask someone, do you want the worst, in between, or the best, nobody chooses the chicken McNugget when they can buy a whole food rotisserie chicken from an organic farm. Right. That's the equivalent of what we're talking. Quality matters, and here in this instance, it can actually be measured, and that's assuring.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we've both done it. You know, I've tested my blood, and just like Rob has a lot with all the others, and it's the only one that I can safely recommend to clients and patients and athletes. And because
do you have it available at Core?
Yeah, we have it available at Core.
Okay, good.
We have a whole way to use it. Because again, with any supplement, if you use it wrong, that's right. You know, it doesn't work. But
if you're not taking care of those big rocks.
Yeah,
it's
so
not gonna do you any good.
We have a special folder that we give to patients and and even athletes, because they're different, on how to use them properly and in the context of a healthy diet. And just like Rob said, it's a tool. It's a tool to increase compliance. I can tell you, I specialized in ketogenic diet before the ketones came along, and the compliance rate was very, very low to no, long term especially. But again, when we do all these tactics, diet wise, that we've been talking about for athletes, for patients, for anybody, they work really, really, really well.
You bet. And I've known you for a long time and heard you talk about the keto diet for a long time, and your actual talks about it have changed. Like the way that you actually promote it and talk about it, I've seen that evolve.
Well, because it's not even the ketogenic diet. Like, I do believe metabolically that, and my whole research, my doctoral research was on it, but for type 2 diabetes. There are certain people that are metabolically compromised that I do think need to be, for a short term, on a ketogenic diet, a ketogenic type diet. But even then, the study I did was with ketones and the ketogenic diet. So it allowed them to be a little bit more lax, have a little bit more macronutrients. So certain people, certain disease states, I do believe do better with ketogenic diet for short term. But even the ketogenic diet is not meant to be forever and ever and ever long term. It's supposed to be to get you to metabolic flexibility. And but again, what you're seeing on social media from keto experts and what the ketogenic diet actually is two different things. And then when you're talking about ketones and a ketogenic diet or a clean diet, that's even a whole different conversation. So just like we're talking about, we really want to stress protein, and really that's why I really forward a lot of people to the body comp keto, to Rob's, and you saw his take on it. But again, one of the major tools is ketones along with the diet, because it's just a great supplement.
So Rob, did you have something to add? I'm sorry, I thought I heard you trying.
I was just going to say, by the way, that's actually an ultimate compliment. Whenever you see a scientist or a PhD or an MD or any expert for that matter that is willing to analyze the evidence, and I'm not saying Willie has changed his position, but to adjust the position, to me, shows the ultimate level of service to an end customer or client. Yes. Nowadays, there are some people that are so dogmatic because they said it one way and they don't ever want to be
They're
wrong.
Dug in.
They're always going to say it that way, and that's why I love Dr. Willie so much, is because I know where he is. He's in kind of this pursuing better place of, hey, I want to know what's next. Hey, if what we have is not the best way, what is the best way? And I think that's another reason we stand behind the brands we stand behind. We stand behind the scientific message that we relay from prioritizing protein. And look, again, I bring it all back to context is key. This looks different for everyone. But at the end of the day, we all want to age well. And if that's the goal, we should prioritize protein first and foremost.
Good.
Yep, and again, one of the things I recommend is ketones twice daily.
Well, we probably need to go to one more break.
One more break, okay.
A word from our sponsors, but then when we come back, I want to get into some fullback talk with Rob. If that's
all right, cool.
Cupcakes and Bubbles, located at 26400 Kirkendall Road in Tomball, Texas. Cupcakes and Bubbles has the sweetest and most delicious cupcakes for the entire family. From chocolate raspberry, strawberry rhubars, cookies and cream, and the most popular among kids, the s'mores cupcake. Come and enjoy our cupcakes with a glass of your favorite bubbles. Visit www.cupcakesandbubbles.com for the complete list of our delicious cupcakes. Order online through our webpage. DoorDash and Uber Eats is available too. Enjoy life's sweetest moments with Cupcakes and Bubbles.
This was a proud sponsor of KNLY 91.1 FM. It's time to change. If you like country, we play it. If you like pop, we play it. If you like Latin music, we play it. If you like rock and roll, we play it, because no one does fusion music like we do. 91.1 FM, The Boss.
Turn on your glam today. The Jenna Klein collection is here, elaborated with natural products. Give yourself a compliment with our organic lip glosses in more than 15 shades. With the Jenna Klein lip gloss collection, you can hydrate your lips and keep that glamorous look that you need. Turn on your glam. Visit jennaklein.com. And don't forget our skincare collection with natural ingredients that will improve the skin's appearance and prevent visible signs of aging. We have everything you need to achieve smooth and vitalized skin. jennaklein.com. Turn on your glam today.
This was a proud sponsor of KNLY 91.1 FM.
It started as a dream. When I was a little kid, I always wanted to have my own restaurant. And it was a dream that finally we had the opportunity to build it here in the Woodlands. And I'm so happy with it.
It's a really authentic Italian food. I try to maintain the most original possible. It's very important. Every day I make my fresh pasta.
Chi mangia bene, mangia italiano. Please come and visit us.
This was a proud sponsor of KNLY 91.1 FM.
All right, we're back, and we got a few minutes left, and want to just kind of finish up with some good info for people to take away from this show. And I want to really touch back on the break. I was telling Jason a quick little fact about Rob, and I want a lot of the listeners to understand, that the company Prove It, right? That's a ketone company. The story, we've heard it a lot of times, but basically it actually came from Rob. So Rob apparently, you can expound on this, had an apparel company, and Brian Underwood, the CEO of Prove It, said, hey, what's that Prove It? What's that all about? And Rob says, hey, you want to be a good, you want to lose weight? Prove it. He goes, you want to gain muscle? Prove it. He goes, you want to be a good dad? Prove it. Prove it. And it's kind of shifted now into, hey, we can get you in the state of ketosis, and we can prove it. So a lot of people, it's just a cool little backstory. But as far as Rob, I mean, I think anytime somebody's too pragmatic, too dug in, they're not able to shift and do best for their clients or patient things, and that's all I ever want is just like you with your clients, Rob with his, we want the best for our clients, our patients, and so I'll always look for the new data that you know. And if I'm wrong, I'll tell you I'm wrong.
That's
I think
right.
too many times in medicine or in even anywhere, we can't. It happens in studies.
Absolutely.
You know, there's user bias.
Bias, absolutely.
They won't admit that something's wrong.
And those people are called zealots.
Yeah.
Be wary of
exactly.
zealots when it
Be
comes
wary
to
of zealots, where they say
information.
one thing is the only way. So
Yeah.
I'll shoot it over to Jason. He had some questions for Rob.
All right.
about.
So Rob, your background, you're a football player, correct?
College football and baseball, that's right. And then I went on to play minor league pro baseball for several seasons. Wish I would have tried pro football, didn't. Got into bodybuilding, strongman. Did the drug thing as far as, you know, as part of that sport, and realized, look, to go to the next level, this isn't me. And so got into strongman because at least there was athleticism and it wasn't kind of run by the anabolic world, and just developed a passion for fitness, and then kind of started educating people and just thought, you know what if we could simplify the message? Created that brand as Dr. Willie was talking about, Prove It, and it was, hey, if you want to run a marathon, prove it, be a better dad, raise awareness for cancer research. It was just kind of a cool name. Everybody has an it. How can we manifest it? And one day I was in our CEO's kitchen making protein pancakes, and he said, that's a cool shirt, you know, what does it stand for? And he said, well, what if I told you you could drink ketones? And I said, you can't, but if you could, that would be interesting, because at the time I had just read a book by Dr. Mary Newport called The Power of Alzheimer's, What If There Was a Cure? The Story of Ketones by Dr. Mary Newport, who's also a Prove It specialist now. And she's the one basically single-handedly that made coconut oil pretty famous by treating her husband Steve because of the NCT conversion and the high amounts in coconut oil and conversion to ketones readily. And I had read that book and thought, wow. At the time, I was following a biochemist that most people probably don't know, but he's arguably the best in the world. His name's Patrick Arnold. I was into the bodybuilding scene, kind of that underground scene, and he had established a grant with Dominic D'Agostino, University of South Florida, created one of the first exogenous ketone supplements. We had access to that patent to license, market, and we just had to figure out how to make it taste good. And you know, we thought at the time, if someone could pee on a stick and prove that they're in ketosis, we have a winner. But it's so much obviously more than that. In fact, we preach and teach just the opposite. We don't want to waste ketones. We want our body to actually use them. And so the story started in a very simple way, and now is developed into an entire brand that encompasses, you know, the reality is body composition is probably the least important piece to academia. It's aging, brain cognition. What does this do to neuroplasticity and epigenetics, and how does it impact the brain in the aging process? Far more so than weight loss and fat loss, but as you know, that's kind of the topic of the day for many, many people. So that's the story. It's where we started, and here we are.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what do you want to leave people with, Rob? Number one, like, where can everybody find you?
Pretty simple. TheKetoneConversation.com.
Okay.
TheKetoneConversation.com. We don't ask for your information. It's just where you can find out what we do, who we are, what we represent, and then we just steer people back to whoever shared the message for them to get more information. It's just kind of a safe landing page where you can find what we believe is truth and transparency. It's not opinions, it's just facts, and awesome. That way people can connect in us, follow along, and then we redirect them back to whoever shared us. That's
cool. So last thing, we're about out of time, so just want to prioritize protein.
Yes.
Look into exogenous ketones. At least, in my opinion, gram per pound of body weight. Depending on the person, we titrate it up or down. And anything from you, Jason?
You know, Rob, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Rob,
amazing
very much.
Today. We really do appreciate it, and
we'll be following you, buddy.
Yeah, hopefully see you back soon.
We'll have you.
Thank you so much, guys. Let me know where I can hear a replay, and we'll cast it out, and we'll get people following your show. Thank
Absolutely.
you so
much. We'll have you back on another time. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
All right. Bye. And we're out.